All right, I'm here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com, where you might be joining us. It is a Friday. This is the JMULL Show. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day here at the end of the week. It's a nice day here. Hope it's a nice day there, getting through this Friday nicely and working your way towards the weekend. But like I said, thank you so much for making us a part of your day. My name is Josh. This is the JMULL Show. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today. We got a lot of things to get to. You know, the Celtics have looked like the team they were supposed to for both first quarters. And even the first half yesterday. They're up by 13 at halftime. You thought, okay, this is they're going to control this game to the end, and that just didn't happen. And not only did that not happen, the Celtics might be coming apart at the seams, and we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this here in a minute. Going to talk about some of the screaming and yelling in the Celtics locker room after the game. We'll get to that here in a minute after we break down what actually happened in the game. But let me set the agenda for you. We're going to start with the Celtics and the Heat in that series. We might get to the Nuggets-Lakers in the first segment. If we don't, we'll get to it in the second one. I want to talk about Joe Burrow. He threw 61 times yesterday, and I want to talk about that. And sort of in a positive light. So we're gonna do that here at about 11:20, 11:30 or so, and then the podium today is inspired by the Nuggets. It's some of the bigger playoff chokes in NBA history, because that one was I think in a lot of ways what the Clippers did was really embarrassing in a way that even some of these other chokes haven't been embarrassing. I say that to say that, like, the Clippers laid down and rolled over, signed a submission. They didn't want to be there in the fourth quarter. Like, even the Warriors, when they choked 3-1 lead to the Cavaliers, like that, like Game 7 was a dogfight. You know, they lost Game 5 because Draymond wasn't there. You lose Game 6 because Cleveland was really good. And then Game 7 was a dogfight. And at least Game 7 was a dogfight. This Game 7 with the Clippers was not a dogfight. And they sort of rolled over. So that I don't think I've seen that before to that extent. But we'll get to that around 11:40. Do some FYI. Get out of here for the weekend. We'll see what's on the docket for the NFL and college football this weekend. And get out of here. But I want to start with the Celtics and the Heat Game 2. Listen, first of all, we need to appreciate that now the Heat 11-1. 11, sorry, that's not possible. 10-1. 11 games. 10-1, 11 games. They've only lost once, and it was to the, by definition, best team of the regular season. Man, oh man. They just keep finding ways to get it done. Let's run through the box score real quick. First of all, again, Goran Dragic, best player on the floor. Bam Adebayo had a much better game offensively. 10 of 16 from the field. He was 21, 10, and 4. That's literally, 2 steals, 1 block. That's Bam in a nutshell. Jay Crowder, 3 of 10 from the three-point line, digressed a little bit, but played good defense, had 12 points. Listen, they had 6 guys in double figures again. It's basically the exact same box score. The dispersion is a little different, but you had Tyler Hero with 11, 9, and 5, again off the bench in 32 minutes. This is really a 6-man rotation right now. I mean, Nunn, Iguodala, Derek Jones, and Kelly Olynyk, none of them played more than 12 minutes. This is very much a 6-man rotation for the Heat right now. And Tyler Hero is getting starters minutes, even with, like, he has earned some of those minutes of those Duncan Robinson starter minutes. And that's not a shot to Duncan Robinson. He was 6 of 12 from the three-point line, 18 points, 4 assists, and he came out firing. So I think that was really important for him to come out firing, knock down, I think his first 3 3-pointers. I think it was 3 of 3 in the first quarter. or at least to start the first quarter. Yeah, he's 4 of 6 from the 3-point line for 12 points in the first quarter. Cooled off a little bit, but still, 18 points from Duncan Robinson on 50% shooting from the 3-point line. You'll take that every single game. But Hero, man, I mean, they combined for 3 fouls, him and Duncan Robinson is officially sharing those minutes with him. They're roughly the same player. I mean, Tyler Hero's certainly more dynamic on the offensive end at this point, but Duncan Robinson definitely the better 3-point shooter. So they complement each other. They sort of fit the same role in the rotation. They can be sort of interchangeable when Crowder, Butler, Adebayo, and Dragic are on the floor and sort of fill that same role, guard the same players, that sort of thing. So, but Hero clearly didn't just play 40 minutes in game one because Duncan Robinson was in foul trouble. Now he if we're being very literal, he played that many minutes because Duncan Robinson was in foul trouble, but it's not like he was getting a leash like that just because he was in foul trouble. Hero only 1 of 8 from the 3-point line, struggled a little bit in that category, but still finding ways to impact games. I'm officially gonna say it. I tweeted it last night, and we'll get to the Celtics here in a minute. The Celtics who looked not good, especially in the second half. I mean, we're talking about a box score. They lost the third quarter by 20. But listen, I need Jimmy Butler to be better than 12 points, 14 points on 4 of 11 shooting. Now, and my co-host on this podcast right here, the Jays for Days podcast, Josh Doring, keeps saying it every time I bring it up, and I don't disagree with it, that the Heat are built in a way that they don't need Jimmy Butler to be this good, to be incredible, and to be the guy who takes 25 shots, and I recognize all of that. But there's a difference between taking 25 shots and taking 18. Jimmy Butler shouldn't be taking fewer shots than Tyler Hero and Jay Crowder. He shouldn't. Jay Crowder is much more little, and like if Jimmy Butler doesn't get to the free throw line 6 times, we're talking about 8 points here. It's 4 of 11 from the field, 0 of 1 from the 3-point line. Yes, he's fantastic in crunch time, and it might not end up mattering in this series because the rest of the Heat have been so good. But the Heat are up 2-0 because the rest of the Heat have been good enough in the first 3.5 quarters, and it have been very good. Good enough has a negative connotation. Very good. And then Jimmy Butler, when things are close, seals the deal. He had 6 points again in the fourth quarter. 2 of 4 from the 3. He had 6 points, 3 steals, 2 assists, 1 rebound in the fourth quarter, playing 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Listen, the guy shows up late in games. But it's the rest of this Heat team that are keeping them in the game, that are doing the things to actually get them to the point where it matters that they have a guy like Jimmy Butler to be a closer. This is part of why it's a match made in heaven and why this works so well, but if I'm a Heat fan, I'd like to see, because there's going to come games where, and I thought it might be this kind of game where, I mean, the Celtics were up by 13. I thought this might be a game where they need Jimmy Butler to go and just sort of take over for the second half to get within striking distance. Now, that didn't end up being the case. The guy who exploded in the third quarter was Bam Adebayo. He had 15 on 7 of 8 shooting in the second quarter, and the third quarter, excuse me. They knocked down 5 threes in that quarter and went 14 of 24 from the field to the Celtics just 4 of 12 from the field in that quarter. And that ended up being the difference maker. I mean, Boston won every quarter in this game except that one. They just lost it that bad. I'm getting from my sources, that sounds really, really well, we'll get to what happened in the locker room, but Kemba Walker, much better in this game, like a lot better in this game. In the second half, he struggled a little bit, was 3 of 9 from the field, but 9 of 19 in this game total. He was making the shots that he got in game 1 because the defense, at least in the first half, and had a couple things going on last night, so didn't see the entire second half. But the things that they had, the shots that Kemba Walker was getting in the first half of this game were the same shots he was getting in game 1. He was just making them this time. And, he started the game with a pull-up 3. He got a switch out of Bam Adebayo, and he went right at him, stopped on a dime at the three-point line, rose up, and made that shot. He was the leading scorer, 23 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 1 block. He was much, much better. Clearly very aggressive and was making a point of coming out strong. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, neither shot it particularly, horribly. They were both shot 50% from the field. Marcus Smart 5 of 13, and we'll get to Marcus Smart here in a minute. They just didn't get enough in this game. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum combined for 42. Tatum did a great job getting to the line. They just didn't have enough in this one, and it was that third quarter that they just sort of disappeared. In the third quarter, Jaylen Brown played 9 minutes and didn't take a single shot. They only got 12 shots in that quarter to Miami's 24. They committed 7 turnovers there, which is not good for possession. That was a big part of this game. 20 turnovers for the Celtics, I believe, which is just can't that can't happen against this Heat team. Gonna look real quick. Breaking news 13 minutes ago, Giannis wins second straight MVP award. I'll pull up his stats here in a minute to tell you what his stats were this season. I don't know them off the top of my head, but 20 turnovers against this Heat team is going to put you in a really, really tough situation. They committed 20 turnovers and gave up 26 points. There were 26 Miami points off of 20 Boston turnovers. Boston shot it better from the field in this game, went to the free throw line 10 more times, made 7 more than them, out-rebounded them. But the turnovers were just horrible. Out-points in the painted them. But the turnovers were horrible. Had more fast break points. Everything looks like the Celtics should have won this game, and they just turned the ball over a lot and sort of fell apart at the seams. And that's resulted in them looking like they might be falling apart at the seams. According to my sources, and my sources being my co-host of the Jays for Days podcast, Josh Doring, who has a subscription to The Athletic right now, and at this present moment I do not, but in the story written by The Athletic about what happened in the locker room, he said Smart came in saying people should stop just blaming him and hold others accountable too. Brown came back at him saying they needed to stay together and for him to chill out. Marcus Smart, declined to speak to the media, left before the rest of the team did, reportedly, muttering expletives as he walked out. But they hopefully they're not falling apart at the seams. Like, this is a team that has been in position to win both games. Celtics aren't going to practice tomorrow. Gary Washburn, who's a sports writer over at the Boston Globe, national NBA writer at the Boston Globe, said after the game, Marcus Smart screaming in the Celtics locker room, and there's a bunch of arguing going on. Smart coming out saying, y'all on that BS. Team is imploding. Smart is in the bathroom. They're still screaming coming from the locker room. Smart isn't the only one yelling. Locker room still closed. Things being thrown around. Definitely a confrontation. It looks like from the story that The Athletic wrote that it was Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart in a confrontation and that they needed to be separated. Chairs being thrown. It was clearly they should. It was one quarter. They won 3 quarters in this game. And I know that, it's going to sound like I'm about to blame Marcus Smart, but Marcus Smart, first of all, Jason Tatum took one shot in the fourth quarter. He went to the free throw line 4 times. I need him to be more aggressive. I don't know if he was tentative because of him not making shots down the stretch in game 1, whatever it was. I need him to take more than one shot, even if he clearly took more than that, just got fouled on them. I need him to be more aggressive than that. I need Marcus Smart to not feel like he's the one who should be taking big shots. Last 3 minutes of the game, 4 minutes of the game, he was taking horrible shots. There are 3 players on this team that I'd like to take a shot when I absolutely need them to make one before I ask for Marcus Smart. And when Gordon Hayward comes back, it's going to be 4. Give me the pecking order of Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker, Jaylen Brown, and then Marcus Smart. And I'm sure there was some frustration with that, and I'm sure that's where the explosion came from. But listen, they're not wrong. You know what I mean? You need Marcus Smart to be better than that, more disciplined. Please. He needs to be better than that. And it's not like he was feeling himself like he was in game 1. He was a 5 of 13 in this game. He was 5 of 9 when that quarter started. So he played pretty well, but you need Marcus Smart to understand that no matter how well he's playing, he is not the first option. Not the first option. And certainly not. He's the guy that if late in games, you're hoping that they sort of lull to sleep against because he's should be the 4th most dangerous player on the floor that you're worrying about in crunch time. And then he gets a wide open 3-pointer because somebody gets penetration, and there you go. And then he takes a wide open 3-pointer. He shouldn't be taking contested pull-up jump shots. So while, it seems like there's a little bit of finger pointing going on in the Celtics locker room right now, Marcus Smart needs to chill in a big way. The 2019-20 MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo, the defensive player of the year, the best player in the NBA, the best player on the best team in the regular season, 29.5 points, 13.6 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 1 steal, 1 block per game. Shot 55.3% from the floor this season, 30% from the 3-point line. That's significantly better than last year. Free throw percentage went down, but he took half a shot more per game, 6.3 free throws per game, free throws made per game out of 10 attempted. He was a beast this year. It's quite that simple. We can talk about it in the coming days, and once we hear more news about the Bucks front office and Giannis chatting what we think he might do. Right now, I think he's going to resign, but we'll talk about that when it's time to talk about that. But Giannis, back-to-back MVPs. We're breaking news here on the JMULL show. We're not breaking news. We just happen to be on ESPN.com when the breaking news dropped. But here you go. So if you hadn't heard it yet, Giannis, the 2019-20 NBA MVP. The Celtics got to rebound fast. And I find it really hard to believe that they're going to win 4 of the next 5. They have the ability to. And if Gordon Hayward comes back, that really helps. They take care of the basketball a little bit. If they turn it over 15 times instead of 20 in this game, they probably win this game. They were, by definition, at least the better team for 3 of the 4 quarters here. They were just really bad in the one that they weren't. So we'll see what happens here. I feel like at this point, if you were leaning Celtics, you have to be leaning Heat. Just because winning 4 out of 5 on a neutral court is a really hard thing to do. But Game 3 is do or die. Game 3 is do or die. We've already seen multiple 3-1 comebacks courtesy of the Nuggets. We'll talk about them in a second here. But 3-1 comebacks are not a... They're actually relatively common in the playoffs this season. But an Eric Spoelstra-led team is not going to lose 3 straight or 4 straight. Games 3 and 4 might be must-wins. Game 3 is absolutely a must-win. Game 4 might be as well. And just for the sake of really a long series, I'm rooting for that. But I find it hard to believe that unless... I find it hard to believe the Celtics are going to win 4 of the next 5 at this point. And if they are going to start that, to embark on that, they need to at least win Game 3 and probably Game 4. I don't think that this Heat team is going to give up 3 straight in any scenario. So that's if you're I was leaning Celtics even after Game 1. I was still leaning Celtics. You have this happen again, and now we're talking about 2 straight games where the Celtics kind of gave it up. And that can't happen. Now they're in a 2-0 hole, and Saturday is a must-win game. Coming up next, we're going to talk Lakers Nuggets for a few minutes. I wrote a story about this on 110sportsmedia.com if you want to check out the written version about what we're about to talk about. And then I want to touch on Joe Burrow just briefly. He threw a lot of passes on Thursday night, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But we'll do that next on the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Friday. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today, wherever you might be coming to us from. If you haven't checked out what's on the site today at 110sportsmedia.com, please do. Western Conference Finals, what to watch before preview type piece from yours truly, and we're about to get to that in a second. The newsletter went out today. If you'd like to get that newsletter in your inbox, you can sign up for it at 110sportsmedia.com. It's sort of in that right-hand column on every single page. So if you're on a page on the site, it should be up there for you to just put your email in, put your name in, and we'll get that newsletter out to you in your inbox every Friday so that you never miss anything that's going on with the site. But speaking of the Western Conference Finals, we got Game 1 of the Nuggets-Lakers tonight. Listen, man, I have to apologize to Jokic because I was big on you needing Jamal Murray to be your best player just because Jokic is a big guy, and having your best player be a big guy just doesn't seem to work super well in most cases at the 76ers and Joel Embiid. I was wrong. Jokic might be the best center since early 2000s Shaq, and he's certainly the one capable of taking over a game and making his teammates better. He's up there with the best passing big men of all time. He might be the best passing big man of all time. There are very few, if any, who have made their teammates better like Jokic makes his teams better. There might not be a player in the NBA right now who makes his teammates better. You know, LeBron is great at getting the best out of his teammates. But man, Jokic makes his teammates so good, and that's indisputable. But let's talk about some of the things I'm looking out for in the Western Conference Finals. The first thing I'm looking for is who has the best third player. Now, the Nuggets, I think, need to have the best third player because Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, as good as they are, right up head-to-head against LeBron and AD, you give the advantage to the Lakers. I think the Nuggets have the advantage in the supporting cast and have the players who are poised to be the third best player on the floor. Because you've got Michael Porter Jr. that I think could be the third best player on the floor. And then on the other side, you've got your Rondo could be the third best player on the floor for the Lakers, and by default, the fifth best player on the floor in the series. The Nuggets have to have 3 of the 5 best players on the floor for them to have a chance in this series. Not a chance, but for them to win this series, I think that needs to be the case. Because, listen, Jokic hasn't been great against the Lakers this season. They've played 4 times, and the Lakers have won 3 of the 4. And in the one game that the Nuggets were able to get, Denver's role players in, Jeremy Grant, Paul Millsap, Gary Harris, Monte Morris, and Mason Plumlee combined for 48 points. You have that, and then you add Michael Porter Jr. They won that game by 24, and Murray only had 6 points in that game. So they're going to need the supporting cast to be really good, because these two teams are made up very similarly. You've got Jokic and Murray who are averaging 25.4 and 27.1, and then you've got LeBron and AD who are averaging 27.6 and 26.6. Then after that, 11 points is the next score in terms of average points per game. Both of these teams get support by committee after their big two, but the Lakers' big two is better. And Anthony Davis is a bigger mismatch because Paul Millsap is going to get a lot of the assignment of that, and that's just good for the Lakers and AD. Jokic hasn't been, you don't love him guarding AD. He probably will in crunch time. You feel much better about AD guarding Jokic than the other way around. Of course, Jokic will force the Lakers to play more JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard because those two guys combined had 5 DNPs, did not plays, in that semifinal round against the Rockets because the Rockets, they don't have a center. So there's no point for those centers. You bump AD back to the 5, have him guard PJ Tucker, and then you win the next 4 games. Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee both played more than 11 minutes in game 1 of that series, game they lost. Neither of them played more than 8 minutes in a game the rest of the series, and Vogel made an adjustment, went small, and they dominated the Rockets from there. They've not only do they have Jokic, they also have Mason Plumlee, who's played big minutes for the Nuggets in the playoffs. He definitely turned in some good minutes in that semifinal series against the Clippers. If nothing else, they got 2 7-footers, and AD is going to have to... He can't guard multiple 7-footers. And while Mason Plumlee hasn't... he's playing around 11 minutes per game. The most he's played in this playoffs is 13:39. So not playing a ton of minutes, but playing minutes, that's going to force the Lakers to play more bigs in this series. It's a fundamental change in the rotation from the last game that they played. Ultimately, I think the bigger mismatch here is Anthony Davis than Jokic, which is saying something because Jokic is one of the bigger mismatches of all time, just because of his skill set as a center, and he can run the fast break you outlet to Jokic sometimes, which is laugh out loud funny, and he can score from wherever he wants to on the floor. The other part of this is that the Nuggets have been horrible early in series. Awful. And massive props to them for being able to play their best basketball when their backs are against the wall. Massive props. Jamal Murray and Jokic have been phenomenal with their backs against the wall. They really have. So props to them. And I have a respect for them that I didn't have for them before that series. But this isn't the Utah Jazz without Bojan Bogdanovic, and this isn't a Clippers team who clearly doesn't realize that they haven't done shit yet. And a Clippers team that doesn't realize that there was only one player on that team who's done anything in his NBA career. This is LeBron. This is the second best basketball player of all time. And this is a guy who does not lose to teams in the playoffs that he is not supposed to lose to. That's why LeBron gets to finals over and over and over and over again. Because he doesn't lose to teams he's not supposed to. Even in the finals. A place where people think LeBron has failed some. LeBron's won more titles than times his team has been favored. I think there was one series in which they lost that they were favored. But they weren't favored when they beat the Warriors. When they beat the Mavs, they weren't favored with the Heat. There was one Spurs series, I believe, but when they lost to the Spurs as that Heat team, they weren't the favored. That year 1 against the Mavericks, they weren't favored. He won twice in Miami, and they were favored those years. And then won that Cleveland series, that Golden State series when they weren't the favorites. All this to say that if you go down 3-1 to LeBron, you are not coming back. There is pressure on you to actually win games early in this series. Like, it needs to be 2-2 after 4 games for you to have a chance. Or 3-1 in your favor. Like, LeBron, apart from that finals, doesn't do a whole lot of coming back in series, but that's because he doesn't have to a lot. It's because he's always out in front of the teams he's supposed to beat. And then he shows up at Game 7s. Every time. If you need a 65-point triple-double, he's going to give it to you if that's what it takes to win a game and not choke. You can say whatever you want to about LeBron. He doesn't choke. You can't go down 3-1 in this series if you're Denver. You have to find a way to adapt quicker. And listen, there's a shot, like depending on the odds, betting on Denver to win Game 1 probably isn't a bad idea. Because the Lakers have looked pretty bad in both Game 1s. But they made adjustments. The adjustment in game against the Rockets was take the big guys off the floor. They were just far and away the better team against Portland, and they just sort of asserted their dominance. LeBron and AD played really well. And that was the story there, and Portland just sort of faded, and Dame didn't play in Game 5. The Nuggets might win Game 1. But if they go down 3-1, the series is over. They have to start better in this one. They have to. They don't have a choice. They have to start better in this series than they have in the other two, because you're not going to come back from 3-1 down against LeBron. And finally, I'll give you my prediction, Lakers in 6. I almost want to go Lakers in 5, but here's what I think will happen. The Lakers are going to go up 3-1. However that looks. Whether they win the first 2 and then lose 1, whether they win 1, lose 1, win the next 2. But the Nuggets do play a lot of really good basketball when their backs are against the wall. They're going to do that again. They'll win one game down 3-2, down 3-1, make it 3-2, but then LeBron will say, okay, enough is enough. They'll win in Game 6. I didn't think... this is the same Nuggets team that almost lost to the Jazz. And now I'm talking about them winning multiple games against the Lakers. They could get swept. They could lose in 5. I think the Lakers will clearly be the better team. Of course, we said that with the Clippers, but the Clippers got scared and lost focus and didn't come through in big moments. LeBron doesn't get scared, and he doesn't lose focus, and he doesn't let his team do that either. And I think that'll among other things, that will be why the Nuggets won't have a chance to win this series. Like, they have been able to claw back in and have a chance that they've capitalized on in both situations to win these other series in these playoffs. But I'll go Lakers in 6. The advantage for the Lakers, I think, is too big, especially when it comes to Anthony Davis, and you still don't absolutely love whoever you put on LeBron. Give me the Lakers in 6. But what the Nuggets have done is really impressive, and they are still a really, really young basketball team that will contend for the foreseeable future. Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow threw 61 times last night against the Browns in a 30-35 loss to the Baker Mayfields and co over there in Cleveland. Let me pull up the most pass attempts in one game. So NFL pass attempts single game leaders. Joe Burrow was in a tie for 37th. 61 pass attempts. Drew Bledsoe threw 70 in a New England Patriots game versus the Vikings in November of 1994. In a game in which the Patriots finished with 26-20 victory in overtime. Drew Bledsoe was 45 of 70 for 426 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was season 2 of his 4-time Pro Bowl career and 1-time Super Bowl champion. Of course, we know that story. I love the idea of giving Joe Burrow the ultimate green light. Because, listen, he showed quite a bit of poise. The fact that you throw 61 times as a second-game rookie and don't throw a pick is really quite impressive. 37 of 61, his completion percentage could have been better. But listen, I want Joe Burrow to have as much confidence as he can. And there's right now no pressure on Joe Burrow. 0. The Bengals suck. They just lost the Browns. The Bengals suck. You know, you get that quarterback to be the center of your franchise, the cornerstone. But it's not like in the NBA where if you get the right guy, you turn around your franchise really, really quickly. I mean, look at Luka Doncic. The Mavericks are close to contenders, if not contenders now. And you just finished year 2. That was a first-team All-NBA. when throw the ball 61 times, do it. 316, 3 touchdowns, maybe you'd like to be him to be a little bit more efficient with his yardages, but listen. 316 divided by 37, what's that? Let's do some quick math here. 316 divided by 37 is 8.54 yards per catch. Yards per pass completed. I'm all for throwing Joe Burrow, and he showed poise, man. He scored, he led the Bengals to a touchdown, drive late in the fourth quarter, gave them a chance to win the game. You score with, whatever it was, 40 seconds left, but you put your team in a situation, okay, if we get this onside kick, we have a chance to win this football game. That's not what happened, but I'm all for Joe Burrow getting a ton of pass attempts and a ton of reps in a time where there's no pressure. And then he showed poise at the end of this game. He did. He only ran the ball 7 times. We talked on, I guess that was Monday that we talked about that. I talked about him looking like he was going to be able to use his legs the way that he did in college, and I still believe that to a certain extent, but I want to amend my statement slightly. I want him to be able to use it, but for it to not be his first instinct. Partly because of health, partly because, there's a reason that the guys who play for forever, the guys who play into their 40s, the Drew Breeses, the Peyton Mannings, the Tom Bradys, they're all pocket passers, and that's not a mistake. I'd much rather Joe Burrow be a pocket-first passer and he using his athleticism, his sneaky athleticism, to extend plays when he needs to, rather than that being a bona fide part of their offense. That's where your longevity drastically decreases. Ask Cam Newton. Drastically decreases when you run a lot as a quarterback. It's why running backs' tenure in the NFL is so short. They get beat up so much. If you want, Joe Burrow throwing 61 times and only rushing it for 7, I'm all for that. Because I want Joe Burrow around as long as possible if I'm Cincinnati and he's off to a relatively good start. And running the ball, just every time he puts the ball, he tucks the ball and starts running, is a chance for him to get injured. And that's not saying that he should never do it. He just should be selective. And I'd much rather see a stat line like 61 pass attempts and only 7 rushes for 19 yards, because that at least keeps the defense honest. If you do it 7 times, he can do it, and you have to game plan for that at least a little bit, and that keeps defenses on their toes. But I want him in the pocket, and I want him using his athleticism when he needs to. If a play breaks down, get 5 or 6 yards to get that first down, whatever it might be, and get to the sideline, get out of bounds, learn how to slide. But I don't need Joe Burrow running around quite like he did at LSU. Use it when you need to. Keep defenses at least a little bit honest, but stay in the pocket, because that's where the longevity is. And that's where, quite frankly, I think that's where the best version of Joe Burrow is in the pocket, and him using that athleticism when he absolutely has to. We're going to do the podium coming up next. We're going to talk about some of the 3-1 blowouts, 3-1 comebacks in the NBA playoffs, as inspired by what we saw by the Clippers. And then we're going to look at the schedules for for football, both on the college and NFL side this weekend, before we get out of here on a Friday. You're watching the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Friday. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thanks so much for making us a part of your day here on a Friday. We're almost done with the week. Hopefully you had a good one, and Friday's going okay for you as well. Inspired by the Clippers, let's talk about for the podium today, let's talk about some of the more, some 3-1 comebacks in the NBA playoffs. We'll start with the first one. The Boston Celtics, 1968. The Philadelphia 76ers were the opponent in the Eastern Division Finals, led by Wilt Chamberlain. The defending champs at the time had the Celtics on the ropes, 3-1. Bill Russell and the squad came back. One of the more famous rivalries in NBA playoff history. Boston achieving the feat for the first time in NBA history. They went on to win the 1968 Finals and get their 10th title in franchise history. You got some other ones in the 1900s. 1981, the Celtics Sixers again in the Eastern Conference Finals. Entered to the first championship of the Larry Bird era. Celtics became the second team ever to go on to win a title after coming back from 3-1 in a series. Bird's bank shot. They beat the Rockets in 6 games following that in the NBA Finals. It's one of the more important, crazy series of the 80s and 90s. There you go again, though. Celtics Sixers, just 13 years apart, and the Celtics on the right side of it. Again, the ones I want to talk about, mostly because these are the ones I have the most experience with. Number one, the Houston Rockets in 2015. 2015 Houston Rockets. This is very appropriate, talking about how the Clippers still haven't made it to a conference finals in their 50-year history, which is just crazy. I mean, myself, and this is a ricochet shot almost at the Grizzlies, but the Memphis Grizzlies have made it to a Western Conference Finals. And they were great that year. But they also played, they were the better team in the first round and played a team in Oklahoma City in the second round who on paper was better but had an injury. I think it was KD, but I'm not positive about that. The point being is that you would think at one point that the Clippers would be good enough and get some luck. Even last year, you'd think that the Trailblazers getting to the conference finals might have been a little... You play a team in the second round that was probably overachieving a little bit. They're young, they're not a great playoff team yet, and you get lucky even though that team had a better record than you in the regular season, and you get to the Western Conference Finals. The fact that it's been 50 years is crazy, but in 2015, the Rockets, highlighted by the Game 6, come from behind win where they won the fourth quarter 40-15. Erasing a 19-point deficit, won 119-107. That was really, really ugly. In a weird way, part of when... Because James Harden got benched in that series, and the Clippers went on to win. Sort of part of that legacy of James Harden as a guy who doesn't show up in big moments, which is funny to think about when that was a series that the Rockets actually won. And then you've got the 2 series that involve Golden State back-to-back. You had Golden State coming back from 3-1 down against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and then you had the Cavs coming back from down 3-1 against the Golden State Warriors following that Western Conference come from behind win. The fact that it's only happened 13 times in NBA history. And 2 of them were this year. The Nuggets doing it twice. The fact that you had 2 of them this year and 2 of them in 2016 is pretty remarkable. But that's the podium. This week we do that every Friday, just some sort of topic. It's typically centered around sports, but not always. Talking about some of the most memorable in that certain topic. And shouts to the Clippers for giving us a topic this week. Let's look at the schedules for the NFL and college football. College football, the headliner this week is Miami Louisville at Cardinal Stadium in Louisville, Kentucky. This is, unless I'm mistaken, the first game between two ranked opponents this season. Where we really start picking things up is in week 4. I mean, in week 4, you're talking about, you get Florida Ole Miss, you get Kentucky Auburn, you get Louisville and Pitt, Mississippi State LSU. You get some of these, the SEC starting up conference games, and you really start rolling. But this week, you got Houston and Memphis, which was postponed actually because Memphis's COVID-19 outbreak on the team. Other than that, Clemson gets another, really tough football game against the Citadel. But Miami and Louisville, 6:30 Central Standard Time on ABC on Saturday. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch. The NFL slate this week, not the most enticing. You got the Vikings, Colts. Falcons, Cowboys is an interesting one. Two teams that are good. The Falcons lost a game that they should have lost. The Cowboys maybe not. So that's an interesting one with at least two pretty, two big brands, especially the Cowboys. Other than that, you're looking at a lot of games where there's clearly a better team. You got Ravens, Texans. The Patriots and Seahawks is the best game this week. Cam Newton, Russell Wilson. The Patriots played a bad football team in week 1 in the Miami Dolphins. We'll see. Yeah, I'm very intrigued to see what that team looks like against a real football team in the that's not fair. Against a better football team in the Seahawks, and one that I think will win the NFC West. And then on Monday night, you've got the Saints and Raiders in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. But should be another good week of football. We've got a lot of sports again this weekend. The weekend of the U.S. Open, I'll give you an update on that real quick. A little disappointed in how low the scores were, I'm going to be honest with you. So we'll just start that with FY. Justin Thomas, a 5 under 65 in round 1 of this tournament. There wasn't a score lower than 68 in round 1 in 2006 at Winged Foot. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. There were 13 rounds of 68 or better yesterday. Still, you got some carnage. There's still a lot of over par scores. I mean, the worst score yesterday, the amateurs rounding out the bottom, but there was a plus 16 yesterday. A plus 6. He's really struggling today. A plus 6, a plus 9, a plus 8. So there's certainly some carnage. Hopefully, I kind of like to see just the USGA just completely turn the golf course the other way and make it ridiculous. That'd just be a little fun. The winds 11 miles an hour today. But U.S. Open this weekend at Winged Foot. Justin Thomas, the current leader, he goes off early this afternoon. But you got basketball, conference finals. You got the NHL, and everything pretty much in between football, basketball, hockey, golf. It's a good weekend for sports. Please enjoy it, and we'll talk about everything that happens over the weekend on Monday right here at twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. If you haven't followed, please do. You can follow us on Twitter at 110sports. Check out the website, subscribe to the newsletter, all that fun stuff over at 110sportsmedia.com. But enjoy the sports weekend. I'm going to do the same. Stay safe. Watch out for each other. We'll meet back here on Monday to talk about all of it. Until then, I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us on the JMULL Show, and I'll see you on Monday.